The traitor legions fight for reasons known only to themselves. Their loyalties to despots, ideals and fell entities, twisting their righteous need for vengeance. Yet among such renegades, some keep to allegiances of immense complexity, their objectives working against their allies, whether accidental or intentional. For today, we shall elucidate the cunning warriors of the 20th Legion, whose intent is unknown not only to the wider Imperium, but even those within their own ranks. The sons of the twin Primarchs, the Alpha Legion.
This is my record, and all the records are lies. The Primarchs of his Imperium are beyond the comprehension of mortal men. Gifted great power and mastery of humanity's most venerated traits, the sons of the Emperor would mold the galaxy's future with their actions. Yet there exists a Primarch whose very nature is shrouded in mystery, whose deeds have spun a web of deceit so impenetrable that even his gene sons fail to understand its purpose. The twin serpent of the Hydra, Alpharius Omegon. The origins of the Primarch of the 20th Legion would be shrouded in mystery. Yet despite such an enigmatic shred of information, records have survived the long millennia. Accounts vary, with some speculating that the Lord of Serpents would be discovered by the 16th Legion, the Lunar Wolves, during the Great Crusade. Engaging with the 16th Legion's fleet with his own armada of vessels, though inferior in their firepower, they would outmaneuver their opposition and employ many devious tricks. Enraging the Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, Horus Lupercal, the future War Master of his Imperium would personally give chase to the Hydra's fleet. Annihilating the Armada with their superior warships, the Lunar Wolves would be oblivious to the infiltration of an assassin aboard their flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, whom would slay the Primarch's elite Justeran Honor Guard. Recognizing the assailant to be his brother, Horus would accept the last Primarch into the fold of the Imperium. This is a lie, for another account states that the Primarch of the 20th would be found on a desolate world at the edge of the Mandraoran stars. Surviving against the elements of the barren planet and commandeering a vessel crewed by a band of miscreant Xenos and human mercenaries, the young Primarch would venture forth to find the Emperor. Another account derives from the tome The Transit of the Human Soul Through Strife, also known as the Codex Hydra. Its ancient writings state that the Primarch would descend upon the world of Bar Savor. Its skies overcast with the shadows of gigantic worm-like Xenos, the Slaw, the horrific creatures would attempt to sate their hunger with the flesh of the Primarch. Capturing the Lord of Serpents, the strange Xenos would keep the Primarch as a curiosity as they beheld his innate strength and ability to resist their manipulations. Converting Alpharius into a living weapon, the Slaw would enslave the young Primarch's mind and set him loose upon the stars. Saved by the Emperor, Alpharius' mistreatment would fuel the Master of Mankind's vengeance to crush the Xenos, and for 10 Terran Standard years, the Emperor would salvage his son's fractured mind. This is also a lie, for an account of the Primarch of the 20th remains, for those whom delve into the depths of the Hydra's deceptions. Penned by Alpharius' own hand, the true record of his origins would be decried as further deception of the Primarch's origins. As the Primarchs of his Imperium would be scattered across the galaxy by the manipulations of the ruinous powers, the twin Primarchs of the 20th Legion would be separated. Alpharius would never leave Holy Terra, and in contradiction of Imperial records, would be the first of the Emperor's sons to be reunited with the Master of Mankind. Within the shadow of the Imperial Palace, upon the Zaranan Plateau, a group of scavengers would set upon the young Primarch. The Emperor would find his son and slay the scavengers to prevent knowledge of his existence from spreading across Terra. Mentored by the Master of Mankind and his most trusted advisor, Malcador the Sigillite, the young Primarch would learn the value of secrecy, necessity, and the elevation of the vision of the Imperium above personal glory. No mortal soul of the Imperium would know of Alpharius' existence, and it would not be long before the Primarch of the 20th would test his innate talents and abilities. Disguising himself as a member of the First Legion, Alpharius would observe the palace coup to remove the Custodian Captain General, Constantin Valdor, from power. The conspirators of the Grand Provost Marshal of the Adeptus Arbites, Uoma Kandawire, Thunder Warriors Primarch, Ushatan, and scientist, Amara Stati, would demand reprisal for the Custodian's massacre of the Emperor's Thunder Legion without the consent of the High Lords of Terra. With the failure of the coup, Alpharius would seek flaws within the defenses of the Imperial Palace and exploit its weaknesses. Attempting to assassinate the Master of Mankind in order to test the Custodian's abilities, Alpharius would come close to assailing the Emperor and slay a member of the Legio Custodes during his infiltration of the palace. The Primarch's ingenuity and resolve to identify flaws within the palace would be the first of the Legio's vaunted blood games, to which the Emperor's Praetorians would to this day continue. Meanwhile, Alpharius' twin, Omegon, would land upon a nameless world bereft of life. Among the empty ruins of the planet, the distant Primarch would discover an ancient relic, the Pale Spear, and study the remnants of the planet's former civilization. Escaping aboard a vessel piloted by human pirates, Omegon would venture into the expanse of the stars and hear tales of the Emperor, his angels, and the Primarchs of his Imperium. In secret, Alpharius would conceal his identity, as several sons of the Emperor would be brought into the fold. Disguised as an Astartes, during the Emperor's reunion with Primarchs Lionel Johnson and Lorgar Aurelian, Alpharius would in secret lead his Ghost Legion in their covert dealings across the stars. For years, the 20th Legion, known as Alpha, would hide in plain sight and leave no evidence of their existence as they enacted compliances across the stars. Yet with the installment of each Primarch with their Legion, the 20th would reveal themselves to their brethren. During the Rangdan Xenocides, the Alpha Legion would present themselves to the First Legion, the Dark Angels. Under the guise of a nondescript Astartes, Alpharius would meet with the Lord of the First, Lion L. Johnson. Offering aid to the First Legion in their war against the Slaw, Alpharius would deny his identity as a Primarch to the Lion and succeed in his deception. For the Alpha Legion, though alike to the First in their championing of secrecy, had not offered aid out of trite notions, such as honor or cooperation. They sought a being upon the world of Bar Savor, Omegon. Slaying the Slaw in their path, the Alpha Legionaries led by Alpharius would reunite with Omegon. Instantly recognizing one another, the soul of the Legion would become whole for the first time since its inception. The time had come for Alpharius to reveal his being to humanity, yet conceal the existence of his twin from not only the Imperium and its Primarchs, but also the Emperor. Alpharius would proffer that the twins shall interchange their names to sow confusion within the Imperium, should their identities be discovered, and with such obfuscation, the Primarchs of the 20th would become ever more mysterious within even their own ranks. The Alpha Legion would be known to the Imperium, yet the Emperor would seem hasty to implement the so-called Last Primarch and his Legion into the Great Crusade. Already veterans of 100 Shadow Wars, the Ghost Legion would increase their proficiency in waging war, with 2 Primarchs leading their ranks. Despite their secrecy, the Emperor would not be blind to the existence of Omegon, and allow the twin Primarchs to wage war in his name unhindered. Alpharius would lead the 20th, with Omegon as his most trusted advisor. The Primarch's cunning and intelligence would be without peer even among their Primarch brethren, as the 20th would follow in their example and be renowned for their disciplined unity among their ranks. Coordinating intricate and deadly warfare characterized by sabotage, assassination, and disruption, the Alpha Legion would not allow any of their brother legions to peer too closely into their arts of war and dealings. arrogance and superiority complexes would begin to fester within the Legion, for the 20th had always looked down upon its more barbaric and unsophisticated brethren. The Legiones Astartes would bear a great distrust against the Alpha Legion and their Primarchs, for even the Primarchs of his Imperium would forever be wary of their ploys and misdirection. Despite being the last Legion to openly reveal itself to the Imperium, with many of its glories and deeds retracted from Imperial records, the now visible Legion would quickly prove its efficacy. Among the most efficient legions to bring worlds into compliance, it is debatable among Imperial scholars if the 20th can be proclaimed among the most lauded legions of the Imperium during the years of unification and the Great Crusade. All that can be known for certain is that their methods combined with a willingness to sacrifice anything for victory would deem the Alpha Legion to be a singularly devastating force. Their pedigree would foster infamy among the ranks of the Astartes, as rivalries would form against the Ghost Legion, with even the sons of the Emperor harboring grudges and acrimony against Alpharius. With the Primarchs of the Ultramarines, Rabute Guilliman, and Death Guard, Mortarion, bearing the most spite against Alpharius for his seemingly dishonorable tactics, the Lords of Serpents would make no attempt to cooperate with his detractors. Yet not all would balk at Alpharius' methods of waging war, with the chief among his praise, War Master Horus Lupercal, valuing his elaborate strategies and battle doctrines. An endorsement which would prove fatal during the era of the Horus Heresy. The Lupercal would be the only Primarch to which Alpharius could be considered familiar, and with the fall of the War Master to the clutches of chaos, the Alpha Legion would be called to join his rebellion. Influencing Horus's gambit to ambush the loyalist counterattack of Istvan V, the Lord of Serpent's deceptive nature would be the foundation for the first devastation of the Emperor's forces. The Alpha Legion would pledge their allegiance to the traitors to the throne, though their decision to side with the War Master is debated by many chroniclers of the history of the Imperium. Records suggest that Alpharius Omegon would be visited by an agent of the Xenos organization, the Cabal, in an attempt to steer humanity's future to salvation. Met by the human perpetual, John Grammaticus, during the compliance of Nerth, the Cabal would impart the Hydra with portents of the future. Their visions would show humanity's path split into two possible futures. Should the Alpha Legion remain loyal, the traitors to the throne would be defeated, yet the Emperor would be interred upon a golden throne as a living dead avatar of humanity's slow decline into extinction. Destined to wage a grueling war of survival against the malevolent forces of the galaxy, the Imperium would slowly rot from within until its inevitable defeat and extinction by the forces of chaos. However, should the 20th side with the traitors, Horus would usurp the Emperor. Realizing his folly, the War Master would cast off the shackles of chaos and begin his utter devastation of the forces of the ruinous powers. The Imperium would sacrifice itself to persecute the destruction of chaos, and after 100 years of slaughter, humanity would in its death knell extinguish the malevolent dark gods. Forewarned with the future portents of humanity, Alpharius would decide the means of the Imperium's fated extinction. Humanity shall sacrifice itself to allow for the survival of sentient life across the galaxy, or wage a grueling war of attrition for 10,000 years before its painful annihilation. Resolving to join the traitor rebellion to ensure the destruction of chaos from within, Alpharius' decision to enact the future proclaimed by the Cabal would nonetheless be made in vain. The futures outlined by the Cabal would with time be proven false, yet the Alpha Legion would march for war. Persecuting campaigns simultaneously, Alpharius Omegon would begin their first act of betrayal during the massacre of Istvan V. Aiding the traitor legions in culling the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard during their assault of the War Master's forces, the Alpha Legion would battle their once allies. The Primarchs of the 10th and 18th Legion would fall, yet the Raven Lord of the 19th, Corvus Corax, would flee from the battle. Attempting to ensure a swift victory for the War Master, Alpharius would dispatch operative Astartes within his legion to infiltrate the fleeing Raven Guard. Carving the faces from the dead Raven Guard slain upon Istvan V, the Alpha Legionaries would graft the skin of their faces to their own and consume the brains of the fallen to glean memories of their service. Boarding the fleeing vessels of the massacre, the Alpha Legion would bide their time during the Raven Guard's transit to Holy Terra. The 19th, with the guidance of the Emperor, would discover the genetic materials of the Primarchs within the long-dormant gene labs of Terra, and would attempt to hasten the replenishment of their numbers. Omegon would command the infiltrators to steal a sample of the materials and inject a virus into the remaining genome available to the Raven Guard. Horrifically mutating the Raven Guard's subsequent implanted subjects, the tainted stock of the Primarch genomes would prevent their 19th's resurgence. Omegon would retrieve the Raven Guard's experiment data from their laboratories and spark a rebellion between the guilds of Kiovar in order to cover his exfiltration. Handing over the data, as well as a viable and tainted sample of the Primarch's genome to his twin, the treachery of the Alpha Legion would continue. Delivering the sabotaged data to the War Master, the 20th would keep a copy of the successful research for themselves to further bolster their legion, for the 20th would look to their own survival above both their allies and opponents. Cutting ties with the Cabal, the Alpha Legion would continue to sow misinformation and confusion for the remainder of the Horus Heresy. Forming a blockade within the Chondak system, the 20th would be tasked to confront the White Scars Legion and hinder their involvement in the Civil War. Sabotaging astropathic communication upon the facility of Tenebrae 950, the Alpha Legion under the command of Omegon would stall the 5th Legion's assessment of the conflict. Yet strangely, with the facility's destruction, communication between the Primarch Jagatai Khan and Rogel Dawn would be established, leading to many questioning the efficacy of the Alpha Legion's orders. As the 5th Legion attempted to breach the Alpha Legion's blockade, the Hydra would not deign to respond to their hails. Attempting to prevent their passage without the use of firepower, the Alpha Legion would, despite their best efforts, be forced to engage the White Scars. The 5th Legion would form an arrowhead formation and destroy a large proportion of the 20th Legion's escort vessels before passing through the blockade and traversing the warp. Their orders to contain and recruit the White Scars had utterly failed, with some questioning the loyalties of the Hydra for their uncharacteristically flawed strategies. Alpharius Omegon was no fool, and had somehow managed to bolster the Loyalist war effort. Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard, would raise his suspicion of the Alpha Legion's allegiance to the Loyalists, yet be unsuccessful in convincing the War Master of their deceit. As a means to test their loyalty, the War Master would command the Hydra to travel to the Alaxis Nebula to destroy the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves. Already battle-wearied by the burning of Prospero, the Rout had been deceived in their manipulation to destroy the Thousand Suns Legion, and suffered many casualties for their transgression. Alpharius Omegon had long been opposed to the 6th Legion's Primarch, Leman Russ, for his overt disdain for the Hydra's reliance on underhanded tactics. Relishing the opportunity to humble the Vilca Fenrica, Alpharius Omegon would ambush the Space Wolves fleet. As the Ghost Legion brought the Rout to heel, Leman Russ would send a distress signal petitioning aid from the White Scars. Still unsatisfied with his assessment of the conflict and unsure of the Rout's loyalties, Jagatai Khan would abstain from lending his might to the 6th Legion. The Space Wolves would desperately fight tooth and nail to survive against the Serpent, and despite the resolve of the Wolf King waning, the Rout would endure. With the arrival of the Dark Angels Legion, the Hydra would flee the battle and seek a new war zone to influence the tide of the heresy. As the traitors assembled upon the world of Ulanor, the agents of the Hydra would facilitate the will of the Lord of Serpents. Holy Terra braced itself for the final siege of the Imperial Palace as fleets stationed throughout the Sol system prepared for the first wave of the assault. Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, would fortify the Sol system into a deadly kill zone. Alpharius would see a challenge befitting his ego and orchestrate his great scheme to not only defeat the 7th Legion, but humiliate them. Alpha Legion operatives would enact their micromanaged tasks and objectives in order to breed disarray within the ranks of the Praetorians of Terra. Long dormant sleeper cells would activate across the Sol system, and with time, gaps within Dawn's carefully crafted bastion would form. Capturing several moons in orbit of Pluto, Alpharius would challenge the Primarch of the Imperial Fists to conclude their game of wits. Personally leading his men against Dawn, Alpharius would charge into battle armed with the Pale Spear and duel his erstwhile brother. Alpharius would best Dawn in combat and deliver a final strike to end the life of the Primarch of the 7th Legion. However, Dawn would anticipate the blow, and after pivoting to allow the spear to impale his shoulder, Rogal Dorn would pin Alpharius in place and sever his brother's arms with his chainsword, Storm's Teeth. Taking the Pale Spear from Alpharius, Dawn would plunge the weapon into his chest, and with a final chop of Storm's Teeth, crush Alpharius' skull. With the death of their Primarch, the Alpha Legion would retreat from the battle. Omegon would feel the bond with his brother die and realize that his twin had been slain. Dispatched to delay the White Scars and Space Wolves from aiding Terra's defense, the Hydra for the remainder of the Horus Heresy would conduct stalling tactics and lesser engagements. Assuming his brother's name once more, Omegon would alone meet with the War Master prior to the final assault of the Siege of Terra. Handing the War Master layouts of the now weakened defenses of the Sol system, the Lord of Serpents would relinquish his fealty to the traitors. Holding a dagger within his palm, Omegon would shatter it within his fist and cast the shattered fragments of its edge at the War Master's feet. Departing from Horus's sight, despite the protestation of the first captain of the Sons of Horus, Ezekiel Abaddon, the Lupercal would permit his brother to leave unscathed. The Alpha Legion would depart from the traitor fleet, and Omegon would grieve for his fallen twin. With the demise of the War Master at the hands of the Emperor, the Alpha Legion would retreat to the far eastern region of the galaxy. Insular in their dealings and seeking no cooperation from their former allies, the Alpha Legion under the command of their sole Primarch would engage covert wars of survival. During the scouring of the traitors, the Ultramarines Primarch, Rabute Guilliman, would confront the Alpha Legion on the remote world of Escrador, and within their headquarters face an Astartes regarding himself as Alpharius. Seeking a chance to prove his superiority against the Lord of Ultramar, the so-called Alpharius would duel the Primarch of the 13th Legion. Yet for his hubris, Alpharius would be slain, though whether his identity would in truth be Omegon or simply another imposter of the 20th Legion remains unknown. A solar week following, Guilliman's forces would be ambushed by the Alpha Legion in a manner seemingly impossible for a legion bereft of their Primarch's guidance. The Ultramarines would be forced to retreat from the planet after suffering catastrophic losses, and in the wake of their defeat, question the fate of the Lord of Serpents. For the Alpha Legion still roamed the galaxy as fractured warbands of varying loyalties. Autonomous bands inhabiting asteroid fields, barren planets and space hulks. The Hydra remains an unknowable force, poised to interfere with the best-laid plans of loyalists and traitors alike. The Imperium claim that the Lord of Serpents is dead, but this is a lie. The head of the Hydra remains unsevered, despite the loss of its twin. And so long as the bisected Primarch remains, his schemes and plots shall endure to wreak havoc across the stars.
We are all an aspect of the Allfather, or have a manner in which we serve. He has his Castellan, his Herald, his Siege Master, his Governor, his...
Here Russ paused and cast a glance over his shoulder at where Magnus stood, some distance away.
Sorcerer,
the Wolf King finished, in tones of distinct displeasure. I said nothing. Russ had not listed himself in his speech. There was little doubt what his role was, at least to anyone who had seen the wolves fight. Russ has a fury in battle that is near a match for Angron's, but he possesses a tighter focus. The Wolf King is our father's executioner. I expect at least one of my departed brothers could have attested to that, although I have absolutely no evidence to suggest that is the case. Call it a feeling, if you will.
So I'll ask you one more time,
Russ said, fixing me with a stare that would have reduced a mortal to a quivering wreck.
What are you supposed to be?
I smiled at him again. I'm the one that keeps secrets. For a moment, I was not sure how he was going to react. Then his face split into a wide smile that showed his long canines. The only genuine smile I believe I have ever been the cause of for Leman Russ, and he barked a laugh.
Ha! Well, in that case, I'm surprised there's only one of you.
Armillus Dinat served as the Harrow Master of the Alpha Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Known as Griefbringer and Instar 9 by the wider Imperium, Dinat would demonstrate his strategic brilliance during the invasion of Paramar 5. The prophet who destroys with power would serve his legion with distinction, yet as would be the custom of the 20th, demand no glory for his actions. His tactics would be unorthodox in regards to the tried and true stratagems of the Adeptus Astartes, his intricate battle plans designed to bleed his enemies before delivering the killing blow. Dinat would earn the attention of his Primarch early in his service to the Legion. Specializing in fast-moving armor and close support tactics, Armillus would be integral to command elements of his Legion during the Great Crusade. An expert yet humble duelist, Dinat would carry both a Thunderhammer and Power Sword into battle, in order to bring to bear versatility in combat. Reckoned to be commander of the Testra campaign, Oanesi genocide, and the harrowing of Callista, Armillus would earn his title for the many notorious campaigns he would orchestrate. A decidedly capable commander in the eyes of his Primarch, Altharius, Dinat would be given the role of strike commander during the invasion of Paramar 5 during the Horus Heresy. Though capable in his ability to dispense slaughter in the name of his legion, Armillus Dinat would, like to many of the 20th, fade from the annals of history, with only scarce evidence of his involvements uncovered long after his likely death.
Ingo Peck served as the first captain of the Alpha Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Ingo would undergo surgical modification, alike to many of his brethren, to resemble his Primarch, Altharius Omegan. Rumors tell that it was the first captain whom suggested to the Primarch of the 20th Legion to undergo the surgeries to strengthen the Legion's subterfuge. During the Cabal Perpetual John Grammaticus's mission to enlist the Alpha Legion to side with the Cabal's agenda to destroy the ruinous powers, Peck would be among the members of his Legion to impersonate his Primarch. Despite being one of Altharius Omegan's closest advisors, Peck would be reassigned to serve under Harrow Master Kel Silonius during the Battle of Pluto. Like many of his brethren's fates, his would remain unknown, though many speculate him to be slain impersonating his Primarch. Some even believe his death to be at the hands of Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion, Rebute Gilliman, though like many records of the 20th Legion, truth is oftentimes obscured.
Sheed Ranko served within the First Company of the Alpha Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Master of the elite Lernaean Terminator-clad First Company, Ranko would be involved in many campaigns of the 20th Legion and remain utterly loyal to his Primarch, Altharius. Working closely with his Genefather, Ranko would aid his Primarch in secret prior to Altharius' formal concession to his reunion with his Legion. Later assigned under the command of the co-Primarch, Omegon, following his discovery and implementation into the Legion, Sheed Ranko would aid in the destruction of the Tenebrae pylon installation during the Horus Heresy. Drinking Omegon's blood prior to the operation, Ranko would assume his Primarch's identity and gain insight into his motivations. A particularly large Astartes, especially by the standards of the 20th, Ranko had successfully posed as his Primarchs during diplomatic missions prior, and thus be perfect to undertake the suicide mission under the guise of Omegon. Successfully destroying the Pylon Watch Station, Ranko would die in unwavering dogmatic service to his Legion. The reasoning behind such a mission, staged against one of the Alpha Legion's own installations, a topic of much debate and mystery for scholars to this day. Ortillon Score served as captain of the Alpha Legion's 78th chapter during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Known as the King Killer or Hydra's headsman, Score would be appointed as a consul delegatus of the Legion and be given unique resources and authority within the Alpha Legion. Dispatched personally by his Primarch, Alfarius, to bring worlds into compliance and to dispatch singular enemies of his Imperium. Score's name would be chronicled into the Great Crusade War Council's lauded Roll of Honor on no less than 7 occasions for his deeds, and despite his acumen as a warrior, he would also show great skill as a diplomat of the Legion. Yet with the outbreak of the Horus Heresy and Legion's seeming alliance with the traitors to the throne, Score's deeds would be scrutinized by his peers. Utterly defeated by the shattered Loyalist legions during the Battle of Epsilon Stravavar 9, Score's once flawless deeds and battle record would see his favor with his Primarch wane. Exiled to the northern rim of the galaxy, Score would be forgotten by the War Master and the Alpha Legion. Desperate to redeem himself, Score would see an opportunity to regain his reputation during the campaign against the Mazoa Forge World. Score would assemble a task force of 9,000 soldiers consisting of legionaries of the Iron Warriors under the command of Narek Drager, Mechanicum Tagmata, and Imperialis Auxilia soldiers. Treating his Iron Warriors allies terribly during the siege of Mazoa, Score would use them as sacrificial pawns to better achieve his own ambitions. Turning on his once ally, Iron Warrior Narek Drager would ally with the Salamanders under the command of Venerable Dreadnought Cassian Dracos and force Score to abandon his campaign. Losing his arm during his engagement with the Salamander Lieutenant Chaplain Xiophas Jur, Score's deeds for the remainder of the Horus Heresy and beyond would be lost to history. The once headsman of the 20th Legion, now disgraced in the eyes of his Legion and Imperium's history.
Exodus was a widely regarded and revered assassin of Alfarius Omegan's 20th Legion of Adeptus Astartes during the 30th millennium. Wielding the strange sniper rifle, the Instrument, a weapon of unknown origin, Exodus would eliminate the enemies of the Alpha Legion with surgical precision and lethality. It is unclear whether Exodus is an individual or a collection of marksmen, but Exodus regardless was seen as the greatest sharpshooter in the Adeptus Astartes, possibly even at the Imperium's disposal, the only comparable contemporaries being the Officio Assassinorum's Vindicare assassins. Legends say that with a single shot, Exodus would bring forth the compliance of entire non-compliant worlds, allowing for the Emperor's swift judgment, without the cost of billions of bolter shells and the lives of untold innocents.
Speak unto me, as you might before your God Emperor, and he will listen.
He listens as a father to his children.
His wayward children.
The unfavored are not forgotten, Perdita told him, trying her best to emulate the priest and 100 others she had known with their dry sermonizing. Unburden your hearts, Space Marine. Perdita watched as Lord Occam flicked his gaze up at her briefly. It felt like the sights of a sniper's rifle aimed at her head.
I have served the Master of Mankind in a life long forgotten, and I serve him still.
Yet you keep company with deviants and heretics.
They are weapons to be wielded, and a weapon is nothing in itself. A razored blade, an undetonated charge, a shell, silent and unrealized within its magazine. A weapon needs a hand to direct its destruction, to decide who will live and who will die by its agency.
And you are that?
No, the Emperor is. For I am a weapon also, and he has directed me towards his enemies.
The heretics you fight beside?
If that is what the Master of Mankind wills, then yes,
Occam said, his words growing keener and sharper with every utterance. This is what Mina Perdita had learned about the Strike Master from such conversations. He wanted to be questioned. He wanted to be challenged. He was unsure of which direction to take. Occam the Untrue was no less lost than the madmen and corrupted souls under whose banners he had fought. In a galaxy of confusion, uncertainty and lies, Perdita decided even a member of the Alpha Legion was allowed doubt. Standing before him in the semblance of a priest, she was a living embodiment of such a principle. The Imperium in its present state is not the domain the Emperor intended, Occam said, his voice laced with accusation. It forever totters on the precipice of destruction, is infested with alien empires, and riddled with the taint of corruption.
Do you not share in some of that responsibility, renegade?
I do not. The Lords of the Holy Ordos, the Ecclesiarchy, and the Battle Brothers of the Adeptus Astartes do. Through their every feeble action, they sustain the ailing beast that is the Imperium. I want to put it out of its misery. I want to purge the rot and the stagnation. I want what the Master of Mankind wants, the Empire we were promised.
How can you know the mind of the God Emperor?
Perdita pressed. She backed away from the altar as Occam suddenly got to his feet. The assassin cursed herself. Instead of venting his imperious fury, the Strike Master narrowed his eyes at her, in thought and recognition. She had responded to the Legionnaire's sudden movement with the reflexes of an assassin, not an elderly priest. The blood that runs through these veins belongs to my genic father and my father's father. I am engineered of the Emperor's flesh. What are you, priest, but the detritus of humanity washed up on the shores of some cardinal world, bloated with its own self-importance? You stand in those rags and in the ruins of churches and think that qualifies you to speak on his behalf? You are but charlatans, puppeting the cadaverous remains of a tyrant you barely understand. His tyrannical spirit burns on in brothers brave enough to prosecute the cold complexities of his will.
And you are one of those brothers?
I am. Occam seethed across the altar. He will deliver the promised empire, a dominion humanity can be proud to call its own. But for such an Imperium to exist, both the tainted meat of the body imperial and the useless fat must be cut away. The weak and faithless of the galaxy are just as much an impediment to such an outcome as the powerful and traitorous.
And that is what you intend to do? Wield that knife and cut away the tainted and feeble?
In the Emperor's name, yes.
Even without the aid of the legionary allies?
Occam gave Perdita snake eyes, his lips curled into a slow snarl. A small blade can do a lot of damage if you know where to strike. Any assassin would be able to tell you that.
Occam is a strike master of the Alpha Legion, serving during the era Indomitus. Leader of the warband known as the Redacted, none of this peculiar band of Astartes bore the gene seed of Alpharius Omegon, instead pledging to serve through defection of their former allegiance. Comprised of the Mentor Chapter Warpsmith, Archon Resner, Relictor Sorcerer Carcinus Quoda, Fallen Angel Sergeant Ephron Hasdrubal, Night Lord Vilnius Malik, and newest Nova Legion capture Autolicon Fex. All would hide their true allegiance from their corrupted Alpha Legion peers to serve the Emperor behind enemy lines. Serving at the pleasure of Harrow Master Quetzal Carthage, the Angelbane, this survivor of the Battle of Escrador claimed to have witnessed his Primarch's death at the hands of Rabute Gilliman during the Great Scouring of the surviving traitor legions. Seeking vengeance for his master's supposed death by targeting Ultramarine Successor Chapter Homeworlds, the Angelbane has plunged several loyal chapters into extinction, such as the Vindicators, Crimson Consuls, and Nova Legion, adhering to commands given by a mysterious benefactor known only as the Lord Dominatus. Advised by the Necron Cryptek, Omizar Vogue pledged to aid the Alpha Legion's efforts out of pure mutual benefit. Upon the mining world of Vitria Mundi, the next chapter deemed ready for extermination would be that of the Marines Mordant. Already ravaged by the wrath of High Fleet Leviathan as their damaged battle barge, Assiduous, sought resupply and repair upon the chapter's homeworld, the Redacted proved crucial to ensuring their demise. As the Angelbane assaulted the planet capital of Selena City, Occam and his men infiltrated the Assiduous. Their strike team aboard their Dreadclaw, the Serpent's Egg, using their chameleonic ceramite to adopt the Marines' Mordant heraldry as they infiltrated the bridge. Slaying the 4th captain and master of the fleet, Paladax, as the Angelbane besieged the city on the surface.
His men's annihilation using melter bombs and plasma weapons, modified with Xenos technology, saw to the total annihilation of their men, with no losses incurred by the Redacted. Returning to their vessel, the Iota Eternus, to await further orders, Chronomancer Voke warned Occam that the Angelbane sought to destroy his band of false serpents, their usefulness at an end following the destruction of the Marines Mordant. Taking the initiative to fire bombardment cannons upon Selena City before Quetzalcoatl's actions could give credence to the Necron's words, the Redacted fled the Absynthia system before reinforcements of the Angels Eradicant arrived. Finding solace within his quarters, housing the rebuilt chapel of the Immaculate Ascension of the world of Canticula, this holy altar, spared from the Wordbearer's purges during a prior campaign, bolstered Occam's faith in the God Emperor as his men found their own means to prepare for the challenges ahead. Meeting with the defected Kalidas assassin, Mina Perdita, who had once failed to slay Occam and was reforged in mind to serve his will. Her need to know their warship's future objectives were mirrored by their countless cultist thralls of the Seventh Sons and their Jagoran shipmaster, Naga Khan. Voke revealing his and the Angelbane's master to be the Lord Dominatus, the Necron tasked Occam with the retrieval of a Tesseract labyrinth for his master's plans. The completion of such a task promised to reveal the identity of this mysterious figure, which Occam believed to be Primarch Omegon, who was set to toil to unite the Alpha Legion once more. Warned that the artifact resided within the demon world of Galmac, within the depths of the Maelstrom. In order to reach the Crozier worlds, the Redacted must secure the Dark Apostle of the Wordbearers, Gora Shenk, leader of the Barbed Oath, to navigate the perils of the warp. Imprisoned upon the ice world of 54 Thermia, used as a means to store myriad dangerous prisoners and artifacts, the Redacted set upon the Sister Superior of the Veiled Mantle, Invioletta, and Inquisition High Explicator, Inigo Valdex. Disguised as Wordbearers themselves, the Redacted seized the Dark Apostle and extracted from the Ice World. Gora Shenk, now stripped of his demon host, Morphodax the Primordial, begrudgingly allying with the Alpha Legionaries. Explaining that the Tesseract, seized from the world of Nemesis Spectra, contained the greater demon, Karnashgara, Slaughterlord of Khorne and Slayer of Worlds. Should it be freed, prophecy foretold that those who aided in its emancipation would benefit from its wrath. Lord Inquisitor Archimedes van Leeuwen, of the Ordo Hereticus, meanwhile seeking sanction from Cardinal Astra, Josephat Hieronima Trazia III, to launch a white crusade to purge Galmac of its heretic denizens. 5 survivors of the Marines Mordant, painted head to toe in black ceramite, would aid in the purge of the Maelstrom. The Redacted venturing to the Maelstrom, guided by the insight of Shenk, the Wordbearer could not allow the White Crusade to destroy his kinsman's shrine of iron within the Demon Forge of Galmac. Ambushed by 2 Red Corsair warships within proximity to the roaring Mortex Warpstorm within the Maelstrom, the naval skill of Naga Khan sundered the first with oversight from Occam, as the Redacted subsequently boarded the exterior of the second vessel, firing upon its lancet ports before assaulting its bridge. Venturing through the Maelstrom for days, following the Battle of the Mortrex Storm, eventually the Redacted and their crew reached the demon world of Garnak. Occam resisting the allure of the ruinous powers as the Emperor's light shone bright in his heart. The Council of Dark Apostles proclaiming the prophecies of the Daedronicon Malifest to have been realized. First Apostle and Demon Prince Drakvar Tal listened to Occam's offer of 1 billion innocent souls as recompense for Shenk's capture and untethering from his demon host. Informing the First Apostle of the impending White Crusade which could threaten their domains, Drakvar Val spared the crew of the Iota Eternus as Vilnius Malik stole away the Tesseract device from the Dark Mechanicus repositories within the Wordbearer's domains. Shenk reunited with the demon Morphodax the Primordial into his form. Occam resisted any attempts to be merged with any demon's favor. Drakvar Tal entrusting his returned Dark Apostle with the ship Dissolucio Perpetua and a crew of Wordbearers of the Barbed Oath. Tasked with thwarting the White Crusade leadership within the Cathedra Crozium of the City Sanctus of Procul Sanctus, Occam disguised himself as Lord Inquisitor Archimedes van Leeuwen as the Redacted and Shenk assumed the identities of the grim Marines Mordant. Such subterfuge broken with the arrival of the true Van Leeuwen alongside an entourage of Grey Knights Astartes, the Lord Inquisitor called out each of the Redacted's names, identifying them as traitors to the throne. Receiving word from the Iota Eternus that their ship had been seized by the returned Angelbane, Quetzalcarthage, Autolicon Fex had betrayed the Redacted in order to avenge his Nova Legion, killing Arkan Resna upon the ship's bridge. Carfax slaying Naga Khan as he sought to withdraw from the system, leaving Occam to die by the hands of the Grey Knights. Assassin Mina Perdita sacrificed her life to overload the ship's Gellerfield, allowing the Angelbane and all hands to be devoured by demonic entities. As mayhem erupted within the Procul Sanctus, Occam released the Greater Demon from the Tesseract device, the Slaughterlord sundering several Grey Knights as the Redacted fled from the carnage. The wrath of Karnash-Kahar not reserved only for the Scions of the Inquisition, as it crushed Gora-Shenk beneath its hoof. As they climbed to freedom from the rampage below, Sergeant Ephron fell to the clutches of the Greater Demon, as now only Quoda, Malik, and Occam remained of their warband. Returning to Voke, with the empty Tesseract, Occam was regardless beyond the point of pleasantries with the Xenos, breaking its spine, which was quickly repaired by its necrodermis as a show of his disdain. Demanding to be taken to the Lord Dominatus with his side of the bargain complete, Occam assumed the guise of Shenk as he procured the Dissolution Perpetua in order to venture to the galactic core. Guided to the Necron world of Royal Balfagar, to which Omazar Voke had originally been born as a mortal, its surrounding by obelisk pylons purged all warp machinations within the ranks of the Wordbearer's crew. Met atop the Black Pyramid Plaza at its core by Alpha Legionaries loyal to the Emperor, Occam would finally meet with the Lord Dominatus, a towering figure bearing the stature of a son of the Emperor. Proclaiming itself not to be Omegon of the Alpha Legion, Voke revealed its true identity to be that of a shard of the Deceiver, Mephet Ran. Such a revelation causing the fractured Star God to unleash its wrath upon the assembled Alpha Legionaries as Occam rallied their efforts. Aided by the Wordbearers remaining of the Dissolution Perpetua, though combinations of melter charges, bolter fire, and even demonic blades such as Gorga Straga, the Catan Shard, regardless, refused to die. All legionaries slain, including Carcinus Quoda and Vilnius Malik, as they attempted to quell its rage. Hurling the Tesseract at the Deceiver, the true objective of Cryptek Voke was realized. Another shard of the Star Gods contained, now that its perfidy masquerading as the last Primarch had been revealed. Having exhausted his patience with the Xenos, Occam fired 2 bolt rounds within the skull of the Chronomancer, taking the Tesseract from its grasp before returning to the Dissolution Perpetua as the sole survivor of the Redacted warband. Escaping the collapsing planet of Royal Belfagar as it tore itself apart, Occam beheld the remnant of a Star God within his palm, contained within the Tesseract. The questions he sought to have answered, doubtless contained within its embrace.
We are all Alpha Legion, but we are not all there is of the Alpha Legion. Nonetheless, a unifying name for our respective warbands would seem useful.
You have a name in mind?
Asked Vyra Nevale of the Penitent Sons. One from history, Solomon said, with an acknowledging nod to the Faceless. If anyone should appreciate this, it was them. The records of the Serpent's Teeth tell us that in the era of the Great Crusade, before Alfarius Omegon and his legion were known to the Imperium, they still operated in secret. Rumors were whispered of their actions, but none knew who was carrying them out. Those responsible were given a moniker: the Ghost Legion. Solomon Akura serves as a Harrowmaster of the Alpha Legion. Inducted into the fold of the Hydra during the latter years of the 41st millennium, Akura has fought within the Serpent's Teeth warband for over 2 centuries. Witnessing the slow decline of his legion as infighting, split loyalties, and chaos corruption further fragmented the sons of Alfarius Omegon, with the dawn of the 42nd millennium, an opportunity to unite his brethren presented itself. Ambushed by the Primaris Space Marines of the Silver Templars within their stronghold, the Unseen, during a conclave of their disparate warbands, Akura declared that to survive, the Legion could no longer combat this new threat of the Imperium piecemeal. Assuming the title of Harrowmaster of the Serpent's Teeth, and convincing his kinsmen to band together in order to combat the Scions of the Avenging Sun, the Silver Templars were routed by the Hydra's schemes. Earning the respect of the First Strike, Faceless, Sons of Venom, Guns of Freedom, and Penitent Sons, by virtue of none of their number knowing the true fate of their Primarch, the warbands of the Hydra
nonetheless required leadership in order to once again prosper. Stealing the blades of Alfarius' legendary weapon, the Pale Spear, from Inquisitor Kaizen Hart within the Cyphos subsector. With the artifact of his liege bolstering his power base, Solomon assumed command of the 20th Legion warbands of the Ultima Segmentum. Adopting the name of their Legion service made during the Great Crusade, the Ghost Legion, Akura leads his unified warbands to this day, sowing anarchy and turmoil throughout the Segmentum Pacificus. Vicus Scale served as a member of the Alpha Legion during the Horus Heresy. Surviving the devastating civil war which tore humanity asunder, Vicus assumed the role of a Chaos Lord of his own warband, the Daggerfangs. Fully surrendering his fealty to the ruinous powers of Chaos, Scale's fanaticism, combined with his conniving scheming, was rewarded by his benefactors with supernatural strength. Armed with a pair of demonic blades, as he charged into the fray by the side of the demon prince of Tzeentch, Sen-Cha, Vicus proved crucial in orchestrating the occupation of the world of Frostheim during the Siege of Fenris of 999.M41. Slain by Wolf Lord Harald Deathwolf during the Battle of Morkai's Keep, his Daggerfang's warband struggles to survive with the death of their liege. The reign of this duplicitous serpent, marked by the betrayal of his legion and his Primarch's ideals, his legacy is a reminder that only death and disgrace shall be won by the betrayers of humanity. Captain Kassar served as a member of the Alpha Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Commander of a Harrow of his fragmented legion, following the great scouring of the traitors, this Harrow Master led his men into the Eye of Terror to escape the wrath of the Loyalists. Responsible for over 100 men under his command, this warband henceforth would be known as the Unsung. Such warriors fighting Chaos Space Marines and demons, stranded upon the world of Bloodforge, which erupted with endless conflict. A demon world, infamous as the battleground known as the Tale of the Butcher and the Blade. The scions of these rival demon princes of the World Eaters and Night Lords continued their grudge match, whilst the Unsung slowly dwindled within the crossfire. The warband of the Emperor's children Chaos Lord, Excrucius the Flawless, seeking glory from the campaign. The assured victory foretold to last a mere 17 minutes and 32 seconds by their Scryer surgeons would be thwarted by the Unsung. 200 of Excrucius' men, both Astartes and cultists in nature, would be slain by Kassar's 31. The Chaos Lord seeing potential in the Alpha Legionaries as valuable allies, offering them safe passage aboard his flagship, the Herald of Pain, in exchange for their aid during his next campaign. Acceding to Excrucius' offer, Kassar could not allow his Harrow to dwindle further. His remaining kin of Dassak, Akasor, Scarif, Shador, Felg, Kaifas, Makhor, Ulker, Reshk, Geskir, Kraul, Skrael, Halpheus, Fadekor, and Falkir, remaining loyal to their captain despite rising tensions. Venturing to the world of Sadreka, following the birth of the Great Rift, the Unsung struggled to comprehend the loss of the Astronomicon beacon and destruction of Cadia, wrought during their stranding on Bloodforge. The Imperial defenders of Sadreka, led by the Imperial Fist Captain, Petrov Daisorian, filled with awe and dismay at the arrival of the living saint, Celestine. This gilded champion of the Emperor only fought upon campaigns destined to stand at the precipice of great defeat. Daisorian establishing a headquarters within Hive Endurance, the impending Chaos Warfleet sought to claim the so-called Beacon Within, which acted as a contingent to the Astronomicon should its light ever fade. As Excrucius arrived in system, word reached the Chaos Lord that his rival, Kordas the Slaughterer, also sought to claim the beacon. The Unsung aiding in the Emperor's children's invasion as they rushed to reach their prize before the deadly World Eater. Tasking the Unsung to deliver a mortal serf known simply as Six, which they referred to as baggage. Should the mortal reach the beacon, Excrucius' efforts to corrupt it to his whims would be assured. Estimating the beacon to be lost, should their assault take longer than an hour, the Unsung fought their way through lines of the Sisters of Battle, as myriad Chaos warbands wrestled for control of the planet. Further complicating the mayhem during the invasion of Sadreka, Kharn the Betrayer, alongside his butcher horde, entered the fray. His intent to claim the skull of Celestine for Khorne's skull throne, a fitting tribute to accompany the slaughter. Cassar and his men combating their first instance of Primaris Space Marines. The Unsung marveled at the advancements made to armor, weapons and equipment claimed from the Imperial Fists. Captain Daisorian saved thanks to the efforts of Saint Celestine as the battle continued to worsen for the Imperial defenders. As the Unsung neared their objective, Kharn would bar their path. The already diminished Harrow splitting to evade Kharn's rampage, Saint Celestine ordered the Loyalists not to fire upon them, as she divined the Unsung's future actions. Watching Cassar lose his arm during a duel with Kharn, a demon which lingered within a blade he had claimed from Bloodforge called out to him. Cassar submitting his soul to the ruinous powers in exchange for a means to save his men, awakening from the bloody duel, finding his arm to be fully healed. Slaying the Imperial Fist Lieutenant, Aldarius, the Unsung fought their way into the planet's Adeptus Arbites facility and identified the beacon. A mortal man known as Caleb, blinded by the divine power of the Emperor and now imbued with his majesty. This living conduit to the Master of Mankind's light proved to be the catalyst to which the Unsung's charge would react. The mortal thrall of Excrucius, hoping to give praise to the Emperor as a truly loyal servant of his will. Despite his best intentions, as he reached the beacon, his pleas for redemption stifled in his throat as his demon host flesh birthed a greater demon of Slaanesh, Slefgraphy. Staving off the attacks of the Sisters of the Crimson Tears, Cassar looked with horror at the birth of the Keeper of Secrets, Captain Daisorian of the Imperial Fists, meanwhile slaying Cordas the Slaughterer, earning brief glory until the Betrayer intervened. Knowing his life to be forfeit, Daisorian stalled Kharn's advance in order for Canoness Lavinia to fall back to the beacon's position. His death by the hands of a Bloodthirster, signaling the impending defeat of the Imperial defense. Saint Celestine, descending from the heavens to face the Keeper of Secrets. As her ardent blade banished the greater demon from the war zone, the Unsung secured the beacon and withdrew from the fray. Once more confronted by Kharn the Betrayer, Cassar's men would be saved by Celestine as she bought the Unsung crucial time to escape. Celestine's wings torn from her back before Kharn beheaded the living saint with Gorchow's teeth, the Betrayer claiming his prize for the Blood God as the Unsung procured an escape void craft. Now diminished to a dozen men of his warband, Cassar had nonetheless escaped the devastation of Sadreka and lived to fight another day. The fate of the beacon, Harrow, and Captain Cassar unknown to this day. None know yet of Cassar's efforts to replenish their numbers, now free from the Bloodforge, have borne fruit.
Lord Bale served as a Chaos Lord during the Horus Heresy and 41st Millennium. Once a member of the Alpha Legion during the days of the Great Civil War, with the subsequent failure of the traitor legions to overthrow the Imperium, Bale went on to form his own warband. Surrendering to the clutches of the ruinous powers, Lord Bale harrowed the galaxy until his invasion of the civilized world of Tartarus. Strangely, for a member of the Hydra, Bale's commanding style championed brutal and unsophisticated assault doctrines over the more subtle arts famed by the 20th Legion, though some speculate Bale to be disillusioned of his legacy following the seeming death of his Primarch. Favoring the patronage of the Blood God, Khorne, Lord Bale's blunt strategies nonetheless proved sufficient in spilling the blood of his enemies. Seeking the artifact known as the Maledictum, with the aid of the Chaos Sorcerer, Sindri Mir, Bale's lust for power blinded him to the deception of his lieutenant. Betrayed by Sindri during his confrontation with the captain of the Bloodraven's Third Company, Gabriel Angelos, the duel leading to his death would be a fitting sacrifice made in the name of the Blood God to further Sindri's own schemes. His legacy that of a charlatan, unworthy of command, loyalty, or ascension.
Sindri Mir served as an Alpha Legion sorcerer during the War of Tartarus. Rumored to have served his legion during the days of the Horus Heresy, Sindri would regardless prove to be a capable and conniving senior officer of his Chaos Warband. Seeking the Chaos artifact known as the Maledictum, the object containing a powerful Khornate demon imprisoned by the Eldar, would be a prize capable of transforming its possessor into a demon prince. Serving under the command of the Chaos Lord Baal, Sindri would orchestrate the Orc Xenos of the planet to combat the Astartes chapter of the Bloodravens, to buy time for their hunt for the Maledictum. Further manipulating Lord Baal to confront Gabriel Angelos and his Bloodravens, Sindri would abandon his liege to die. Convincing the Bloodraven librarian, Isildur Akaios, to surrender to the temptations of the ruinous powers, Isildur would seek to use the Maledictum for himself to combat the enemies of his chapter. Slain for his betrayal by Captain Gabriel Angelos, Akaios would prove a worthwhile distraction as Sindri sacrificed countless souls to release the power of the Chaos Artifact. Harnessing the Maledictum, Sindri would achieve apotheosis and transform into the form of a demon prince. Slain by Gabriel Angelos, wielding the demon hammer, Godsplitter, Sindri's death would release the Khornate demon into the material world, and for his schemes, be banished into the warp. His soul forevermore, a plaything of the dark gods, Sindri's soul languishes within the realm of chaos, and endures untold suffering at the hands of the ruinous powers.
Firavius Caron served as a Chaos Lord of the Alpha Legion during the 41st millennium. Pledging his fealty to the Blood God, Khorne, the gifts imparted to the former scion of the Hydra empowered him to lead his warband to lay claim to the Imperium-held Kuarava system. Reinforcing the Chaos spawn besetting the system, summoned by a latent Psyker within the garrisoned Imperial Guard regiment, Firavius and his men invaded the planet of Kuarava IV, utilizing the spawned warp rift. Attempting to transform the Kuarava system and its domains into demon worlds, should Caron hold dominion of the sector, he would utilize such territories as a staging ground for further chaos incursions. Promised ascension as a demon prince of Khorne should he succeed, Caron committed all his resources to achieving his goal. Armed with several potent weapons and armaments, such as the armor of Alfarius, Khornate chain axes, and a variety of warp powers, despite his best efforts, the Chaos Lord proved incapable of besting the Imperial defenders. His soul cast into the realm of chaos, the pretender prince of the Blood God suffers endless punishment and torment for his failure. The screams of the fallen serpent, amusing the servants of the Blood God for eternity.
Arcos the Faithless serves the Alpha Legion during the 41st millennium. A veteran of the Long War, Arcos would serve as a captain of the 20th Legion during the Great Crusade as a loyal Astartes until his descent into damnation during the Horus Heresy. Following the path of the arch-traitor, Horus Lupercal, Primarch Alfarius Omegon would appoint Arcos as their equerry during the Great Civil War. Fleeing into the Eye of Terror, with the fall of Alfarius at the Battle of Pluto and end of the War Master's tyranny during the Siege of Terror, Arcos would continue the works of his Primarch and assume the mantle of Chaos Lord. Leading his own warband, the Faithless, and commanding his own despoiler-class battleship, Anarchy's Heart, Arcos has spent much of the following millennia raiding Imperial shipping lanes in the vicinity of the Eye of Terror. Spreading sedition, rumor, and provocation throughout Imperial strongholds, Arcos supplies weapons and supplies to cultist uprisings to further spread chaos across the stars. Masquerading as loyalist space marines to better infiltrate Imperial worlds, the Faithless act behind enemy lines as saboteurs to enable Arcos' meticulous strategies to unfold. Among the most cunning and devious warriors in the galaxy, Arcos rarely fights in the midst of battle and prefers to orchestrate his mortal pawns to fight for his own purposes. A master of subterfuge and espionage, Arcos has been attributed the title of Scion of Alfarius for his immense prowess as a tactician, strategist, and manipulator. Intervening during the Siege of Vrax, Arcos' 17-year-long campaign of attritional warfare would harry the loyalist defenders of the Forge World of Vrax Prime and dispatch his men to reinforce the Vrakisian renegades wresting control of the planet. annihilating entire regiments of the Death Corps of Krieg while simultaneously infiltrating the starport of Vrax Prime. The Faithless, disguised as Loyalist Space Marines, would meet with the Apostle Cardinal Astra, Zaphon, and pledge their support in exchange for his submission to the Ruinous Powers. Training the renegade militia forces and aiding their might to the defense of the starport, the Faithless would confront the forces of the Dark Angels chapter, led by their Supreme Grand Master, Azrael, during 821.M41. For 8 days, the Space Marines would battle, until Azrael would order the final assault to end the war. Deploying the 1st, 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 9th Companies, the Dark Angels would overwhelm the mortal defenders of the spaceport, with Azrael at their spear tip. Springing a trap upon the Dark Angels, the Faithless would use their allies as bait before encircling Azrael's forces. Toppling the Dark Angel standard, the Faithless would observe Azrael racing through enemy lines to reach his fallen brother, Anmael, to once more raise their banner aloft. Fighting over the standard, despite the Faithless's resolve, Azrael would best them in combat, and once more raise his chapter's sacred banner. Arcos would personally duel Azrael as the Supreme Grand Master fought his nemesis one-handed as he refused to lower his chapter's banner. Gaining the upper hand, Arcos would injure the Keeper of Truth and disarm him. Still clutching Anmael's banner, Azrael's life would be saved by his Deathwing Terminators, led by Interrogator Chaplain Belphegor. Striking with his Crosium Arcanum, Belphegor would damage Arcos's power armor when attending to the Supreme Grand Master. The Dark Angels would hunt down the remaining Faithless, and despite losing 200 Battle Brothers, drive the Alpha Legion warband from Vrax. Returning to their conquest once more during 822.M41, the Faithless would broadcast a transmission to all Chaos warbands in the sector, rallying them to join them in their attempt to once again claim Vrax Prime. The Cornate Chaos Lord, Zuffor, would heed the call to arms and lead his Skulltakers warband to join the Faithless under orders from the War Master of the Black Legion, Abaddon the Despoiler. Subjugating all lesser warbands to his rule, fighting among Vrax Prime, Zuffor would make a deal with Arcos due to his alliance with the Vraxian Cardinal, Zaphon. For the Faithless's independence, Arcos would allow Zuffor to capture Zaphon to subjugate to his will, and with the pact made, the Faithless would remain true to their word. Sacrificing Zaphon in the name of Khorne, Zuffor and his Cornate Berserkers would turn the Cardinal's palace into a slaughterhouse, and with their bloodlust sated, a new threat would arrive in system. The Ordo Malleus of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition, aided by the Angels of Absolution, would descend upon Vrax at the behest of Supreme Grand Master Azrael. Interrogator Belphegor would be dispatched to aid the Angels of Absolution, and alongside the Inquisitor Hector Rex, would resolve to capture Arcos. Assaulting the Basilica of St. Leonis, Belphegor would lead the Stern Guard of his own chapter's Deathwing Company to apprehend their charge. Supported by their unforgiven kin, the Stern Guard searched the Basilica, capturing and slaying several faithless Astartes. Fatally wounded during the battle, Arcos would survive his encounter with the Angels of Absolution until Belphegor would once more confront the Scion of Alfarius. Driving the Faithless from the Citadel, the Stern Guard would cut down the Faithless as Belphegor's Crosium crashed into Arcos' skull. Capturing Arcos at the cost of the life of Master Yafnir of the Angels of Absolution and many of his kin, their prisoner would be transported for questioning within the Dark Angels' fortress monastery, the Rock. To all accounts, Arcos' deeds end here, his imprisonment by the Dark Angels and any secrets he may utter kept closely guarded by the Dark Angels' inner circle and their interrogator, chaplains.
This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The deeds of the Hydra continue to confound the many factions of the galaxy, none truly able to pierce the web spun by these purveyors of lies and deceptions. Misdirection is a potent tool when applied expertly, yet nonetheless, its fruits grow bitter with continual reliance. For trust is a commodity in and of itself, worth more than many deem its cost. So remind yourself of the deeds of the Hydra, for their talent for manipulation is undeniable. Just remember that they stand alone amongst renegades, and such allies always fail to thrive, bereft of a unifying vision and purpose.